Welcome to the first Zoom presentation created by Habesha Kids Education Network with Henok Nigatu. This presentation was recorded on January 29th, 2022. This presentation is to help parents and students get ready for college and beyond. Topics that are covered are how to successfully navigate the college admissions process, how to take advantage of diversity programs and scholarships, and high school curriculum and standardized testing. Please enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
My name is Henok. Just go ahead and present what I have. Okay. Hi guys. Glad to help everyone out. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So I'm Henok. I'm currently a junior at Yale. I'm an economics major, also minoring in education studies in the humanities. And so post-graduation, really plan to focus on the financial services industry. Really in particular, want to go into real estate. And so like most of you guys, probably was born in the States, was born in Arlington, currently live in Springfield. And so it's always been a passion of mine to give back to my community, especially my fellow Abishas. And so one way that I've been doing it over the past few years is just, giving people information about getting into college. And so far I've helped one girl get into Dartmouth and then another girl get into UVA. And so just want to take some time today to really speak about the college admissions process, really give a sense of what's required to get into the school of your choice. But before we get into that, I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about the meaning of education. And so for everyone that's attending, this is extremely important information. And so I'd really encourage all of you to really make the best use of our time and really take notes. So I'd also like to say, like Mekdis mentioned, that this would still be useful to anyone, entering high school or anyone who's a freshman or sophomore. I think it'd be helpful to get that sort of roadmap and think a few steps ahead. And so towards the end, we'll leave some time to go through a Q&A. So feel free to write down any questions as they come up. Like Mekdis said, I'd only like to take questions from the youth at this point. Came here today to serve my generation. Okay, so like I said, we'll just go into what the meaning of education is. So I'll be mentioning some philosophers. So really, before we get into why college and that sort of thing, really want us to take a step back and really think in broad terms why we do the things we do, and want to take some time to talk a little bit about Aristotle. And so Aristotle, he's a philosopher, Greek philosopher in the 5th century BC. And one of his big ideas is that every living thing in this world has a telos, which in Greek essentially means purpose. And so in one of his most famous works, the Nicomachean Ethics, he goes on to talk about another key idea, ergon, which means in Greek function. And so one of his theories is that when we think about what separates human beings from the animals, the only thing that distinguishes us is our consciousness and our rational ability. And so as he goes on to argue, the human function or the human ergon is to live in accordance with our rational ability. And when we do that well, when we're truly functioning and rational animals, can we be said to be good humans and achieve the best human life possible. And so as he goes on to say, this intellectual ability coupled with moral excellence is what leads us to have a good life and a happy life. So I just want you to keep this in mind as you guys go through school every day. And so I'll just read a very small passage from the ethics, just to give you guys some more detail. So this is the first book of the Ethics, chapter 5. So he says, to judge from the lives that men lead, most men and men of the most vulgar type seem to identify the good of life or happiness with pleasure. And so I just want to mention that just because I think the base way we live without education is to identify happiness with pleasure. And I sort of want to push back on that today. And then I'll also read Plato's Republic, just a few lines. So Plato, just for context, is Aristotle's teacher, and he talks a lot about education as well. So just as you see on the slide, there's a picture of a cave. And so I want you guys to close your eyes and sort of imagine what he's talking about. Or if it's better for you to look at that picture and really think about what he's saying. So I'll go ahead and speak a little bit about that. So this is the Republic, book 7. And so Plato says, imagine this. People live under the earth in a cave-like dwelling. Stretching a long way up toward the daylight is its entrance, towards which the entire cave is gathered. The people have been in this dwelling since childhood, shackled in chains by the legs and neck. Thus, they stay in the same place so that there's only one thing for them to look at, whatever they encounter in front of their faces on the wall. But because of this, they are shackled, they are unable to turn their heads around. A fire is behind them, and behind them as well is a wall between the fire and the prisoners. Some light, of course, is allowed them, namely from a fire that casts its glow toward them from behind them, but being above and at some distance. And between the fire and those who are shackled, there runs a walkway at a certain height. And now imagine that a wall has been built the length of the walkway, like the low curtain that puppeteers put up over which they show their puppets. And I'll go ahead and continue. The images carried before the fire. So now we can imagine that all along this low wall, people are carrying all sorts of things that reach up higher than the wall. Statues and puppets and carvings made of stone or wood, and many other artifacts that people have made. As you would expect, some are talking to each other and some are silent. And so this is basically Plato's idea of the natural human condition, is that we're naturally drawn to things that are not real. So he goes on to say, so now I watch the process whereby the prisoners are set free from their chains, and along with that, cured of their lack of wisdom. And likewise, consider what kind of lack of insight must be if the following were to happen to those who are chained. Whenever any one of them was unchained and was forced to stand up suddenly, to turn around, to walk, and to look up toward the light. In each case, the person would be able to do this only with pain, and because of the flickering brightness, would be unable to look at those things whose shadows of which they previously saw. And now he goes on to talk about what if we escape our natural human condition and we become free, the process of which is mainly education. So out of the cave into the daylight. Now, however, if someone using force were to pull him away from the chains and away from the cave and drag him up the cave's rough and steep ascent and not let him go until he had dragged him out into the light of the sun. And now, if once again, along with those who had remained shackled there before, the freed person had to engage in the business of asserting and maintaining opinions about the shadows, while his eyes were still weak and before they'd readjusted, would he not then be exposed to ridicule down there? And would they not let him know that he had gone up, but only in order to come back down into the cave with his eyes ruined? And thus they would think it certainly does not pay to go up out of the cave. And if they can get a hold of this person who takes it in his hand to free them from their chains and to lead them up, and if they could kill him, will they not actually kill him? So why do I mention these two dead Greek philosophers, and what can we gain from them and from their writings? I think from Aristotle, his point is very clear that using our minds is central and integral to us as human beings living fulfilled lives and achieving moral excellence. And so education is something I want to stress today. And you guys being in school is a means by which we flex the mind and the muscle we call our minds, thereby encouraging our flourishing and our happiness. And I just want to mention a quote that my teacher would always tell me. He'd always say, "We do not read because we are human because we read." And I'll let that sink in. And so why do I mention Plato and the Republic and the nature of the cave and the human condition? I think his point is also very clear, that enlightenment and gaining wisdom is not personal. We are morally obligated to bring the underprivileged around us into freedom of all types, including intellectual, financial, and moral freedom, which is mainly freedom from addiction, or freedom from the addiction to pleasure, which is the natural human condition. So the cost of not using our minds is beast-like slavery. And so Shakespeare says something similar in King Lear. He has his character Edmund say, "Men are as the time is," which means we are slaves to our culture if we do not educate ourselves. I'll give one more quote before we move on to some more applicable college stuff. So Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of England, he was once asked by a reporter why he doesn't take all of the students at Oxford and all the students in London and put them in the war. So at the time, England was losing pretty badly to Germany. And so Winston Churchill, he looks down, he thinks about it, and then he tells the reporter, "Then what are we fighting for?" And so Winston Churchill seems to agree with Plato that education is worth dying for. So taking these points together from Winston, from Shakespeare, from Plato, and from Aristotle, education is central to both our personal and communal flourishing. And the more we tap in to a childlike fascination with a world divinely ordered by God, the easier this is to do. Okay, so now that we have a certain idea of education in our heads, we can go ahead and talk about college and what it means, why we do it, and how to get in. So just like we talked about education and why we do it, I'd like to talk about college and why we do it. And so college is not, for the hopeless romantics. And so, when you think about salaries and what you're going to do post-graduation, salaries are purely a result of job demand and labor supply. And so if you study something like communications, these majors tend to be oversupplied in our current market. And when you think about you taking a loan or anything like that, or having a financial obligation, when you don't aggressively contact people in another target industry, this will leave you jobless and in debt post-graduation. And so the key here is just understanding the job market for your particular major. On the other hand, on the other extreme, college is not for the utilitarian. And so if you know you're interested in a particular discipline, if you want to be a plumber or an electrical engineer, and you know that from the get-go, college is not for you, I would say go into trade school and pursue your career that way. And similar light, going to college to please your parents or picking a major purely based on money or social status will leave you extremely unsatisfied with life, period. So from personal experience, I know a ton of investment bankers on the street. These types don't, they're not walking on Wall Street like jumping like gazelles. They're not happier than the rest of us. And so I want you guys to take that into account. And so college is for those who are practical and those who like learning new things, and those who want to get a breadth of education and really study God's world as he created it. And it's also for those who want the option of having a white collar job post-graduation. Okay, so now that we have those two things out of our way, what education is and what college is, we can talk a little bit about, how do we get there, or how do we get into college? So obviously the first, thing to do or to keep in mind would just be creating a college list. And so the key here is really you're balancing four things as you create a college list. You're going to be balancing financial constraints. So what's the tuition like? Is it an in-state school? Is it an out-of-state school? Are they giving you a scholarship? Are you going to be taking any loans? Those are probably the most pressing questions that you should be asking yourself. And then, the second thing that you should keep in mind is just job market demand. And so we talked about freedom earlier, freedom from chains, and then the natural human condition. And so just some things to keep in mind would just be, what's the brand name of the school? Is the alumni network strong? Do they have a certain strength of programs? Johns Hopkins is very known for medicine. Certain schools have good specialties. And so that's another thing to keep in mind as you make a college list. And the third thing to keep in mind would just be, your personal freedom or personal passion. And so, you're looking at, does the school have, majors that in case you were to change down the line, other majors that you may be interested in. And then the final point to keep in mind is, communal freedom. And, as Plato mentioned, sort of going back into that cave and freeing people from the natural human condition and freeing them from their slavery. And so does a school or do these schools have the resources or platforms to turn you into the leader that you wish to become? And so the demographics of the school will play a part in that as well. And so really, I just encourage you guys, especially my juniors, to just take that time to do research into these four questions. Okay, and so now how do we practice that? Or what's the actionable item? And so I think common wisdom is to create a college list with a normal pyramid structure. And so you have, a lot of safeties at the bottom. Say you're applying to 12 schools in total, maybe 6 of them are safeties. You're going to apply to 2 or 3 somewhat difficult schools, and then you're going to apply to 1 or 2 difficult schools. And I think today I'd really like to emphasize and push back on that wisdom. And so this sort of typical pyramid structure is not helpful, especially because you don't really know what schools will fall in love with your application. And so I always have people tell me, well, I'm going to apply to Tech, I'm going to apply to VCU, and then I want to apply to Harvard. And so when you apply in that sort of way, Harvard is extremely difficult to get into. And so your chances of getting in are not high. But if you apply to VCU, if you apply to Tech, and then you apply to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, Vanderbilt, Williams, and all of these schools, all of those schools are difficult to get into, but the chances of you getting into one is pretty high, if that makes sense. And so what I would encourage you guys to do is to have 1, 2, or 3 safeties that you have a pretty good chance of getting into. And then for the rest of your schools, most people apply to 10 to 12. For the rest of the other 8 to 9 schools, I would apply to difficult schools. So my encouragement would be to apply and aim for around 10 to 12 schools on your Common App, and then that will increase your chances as far as getting into a good program. So just summarize, apply to 1 to 3 safeties, and then for the rest of your college list, apply to as many difficult schools as your time and schedule allows. Okay, so the second thing, the second actionable item that I wanted to talk about today would just be diversity programs and diversity scholarships. So this is something that I have some personal experience with. So as you create your college list and sort of explore your options, you should really consider, especially for all of us in this Zoom meeting, being Abhishas, to apply for diversity programs and fly-in programs. And so essentially what these are, they're just fully funded programs that top 50 liberal arts schools across the East Coast, like Amherst, Williams, and Bowdoin, run, namely to bring diverse and first-generation talent. So these programs tend to start around the first quarter of your senior year. So I would keep that in mind for all of my juniors. And so students that attend these diversity fly-in programs tend to have a very, very, very high chance of being accepted into the school for regular decision. And so just to give some color and some background, I attended Williams College up in Massachusetts. I attended University of Pennsylvania's fly-in program, and I also attended Bowdoin's fly-in program. And so I think another piece of advice I would give is just these programs are really great ways to see if you'd be happy at the school if you were actually a student. And this sort of thing doesn't tend to be talked about as much in our community. So another point would be these places tend to have very generous aid as they're flying you out for free and essentially wining and dining you. Then as far as scholarships, I think as far as you think about financial constraints, there are definitely a few major scholarships that you should consider. There's the Coca-Cola scholarship, the Bill Gates scholarship, and then for all of us, the Ron Brown Foundation scholarship. The Ron Brown Foundation scholarship is essentially a scholarship. I think it's $25,000 a year for a diverse talent across the country. I'd highly encourage any of my seniors or juniors to look into that and what they require for that. So as with most things, Google is your friend. Okay, and so now we're going to get into the Common App, sort of how do we think about it. So obviously the most relevant piece of your application would just be the coursework you've taken, your GPA. And so really the type of GPA that's required for you to get into the school of your choice really depends. There isn't no one set GPA. Obviously the higher the better, but depending on what sort of schools you're targeting, what programs they have, the courses available at your school. Some high schools don't have as much IB programs, that sort of thing, or depending on any extraordinary circumstances like family issues, your GPA can be flexible in that way. But I would just encourage all of you to take a challenging coursework to the extent that your schedule allows. But in general, the quality schools tend to want an upward trend in GPA from the freshman year to your senior year. And so what that means is that every year, starting from your freshman year, you should be taking harder and harder classes as you progress. And you should be taking more of them per year. And so this includes, AP classes, IB programs, any honors classes, that sort of thing. And so depending on your ambitions, if you have Ivy League or that sort of conference ambitions, then I would aim for a weighted GPA of a 4.2 or above. At the same time, just like we talked about being utilitarian earlier, taking hard classes that you don't enjoy for the sake of your GPA is utilitarian, will lead to burnout over time. So I would just encourage you guys to challenge yourself as much as you can, and really adapt a fascination with the world, and this sort of balancing act will become very natural to you quickly. And so I guess another point that I'd like to bring up is that there were several courses in my junior and senior year that I did not take, which were AP and IB programs. And I mentioned that in the miscellaneous portion of my Common App, how I just mentioned that I didn't want to take a certain set of classes because I was more interested in another class that wasn't an AP class. And that resonated with my admissions officer, and he ended up liking that a lot. So then again, just to reiterate, don't be utilitarian, but challenge yourself. Okay, and now we're going to talk about letters of recommendation. So these sorts of writing things, they tend to be extremely important for the Common App. And so your teachers are people who've interacted with you for extended periods of time, and they can say a lot about the type of student you are and the work you produce. And so for all of my sophomore and juniors, I would highly, highly recommend that you get close to one or two teachers that you really like and start that process today, not tomorrow. And so ask them questions, get lunch with them, turn in your work on time, really just sort of learn the skill to develop relationships. And this is extremely important, not just in high school, not just in college, but as you seek jobs and network while you're in college, and seek out internships. So ideally, I'd recommend that the teachers that you pick for your letters of recommendation be in the same discipline that you intend to major in. And if you don't know what you intend to major in, that's okay. Just pick what you're good at for now. Okay, and then the personal essay. This is by far the most important part of the application period. And so when you think about how many essays the admissions officers read, not just at the top schools, but at any school, they literally read thousands of essays in a 3 to 4 hour sitting. And so you should take this opportunity to really advocate for yourself and demonstrate the diversity you're going to bring to their campus. And so just to read you guys a quote. So your essay should be so personal and so specific that if it fell out of your pocket at school without your name on it, anyone who knows you will be able to read it, immediately know it was yours, and return it to you. Okay, and so I'm just going to talk a little bit about how exactly we approach the personal essay. And so what I'd like to stress is that your essay, your personal essay, your Common App essay can be written about anything. And really the key here is you're going to make dramatic a very ordinary experience or a very ordinary story and relate it to your personal or communal identity. And then with that, tack in your main talent. And so that seems to be the most personal and powerful way to communicate what you're about. And so I'll just say it again, because this is so important. You're going to take a very ordinary experience or a very ordinary story or anecdote, and relate that to your personal or communal identity, which has to do with your main talent. And so in other words, a single theme or a single talent of yours should unify your entire application. And so you want that theme to bleed into, your secondary essays, your main essay, as well as your letter of recommendation. And so in that very ordinary experience, did you find, a deeper meaning, or did you have, a certain lesson that you took with you? And those are the sorts of questions that you should be thinking about. And so personally, what helped me is journaling. So even if you're a freshman or a sophomore, journaling can be a great way to become very comfortable with your personal voice. And so that's what we should do. And but what should we not do? So as far as your essay goes, you should not regurgitate accomplishments or achievements that are visible elsewhere on your application. And so your essay should not be about any of your extracurriculars, if that makes sense, because you're going to list them out elsewhere on the Common App. And you should also not write about any overused topics. And so, sob stories, obviously this has affected most of us in this community, but a death of a grandparent or even a pet, these are topics to avoid just because thousands of students write on these topics every year. Okay, and so how exactly do we structure our Common App essay? And so this is what I would recommend. This works for most people. So in your first paragraph, you're going to have, like we mentioned, and like we talked about, that personal anecdote. It can be very ordinary. I know people who've written about, them going on the bus every morning to school and what they learned, or them being a cashier at, Walgreens and what they learned. So these sorts of ordinary experiences and stories tend to have a lot to say about us as people and human beings. And so with that, I'd set up a powerful story by recalling a very ordinary memory. And in your very first sentence, like we talked about, you want a dramatic hook to draw the reader in. So like we said, these admissions officers are reading thousands of essays in like 3 hours. And so because of that, you want a very, very, very dramatic first sentence to draw them in. And in your middle paragraphs, what you really want to do is just reflect about your personal identity. And so you want to explain in detail something critical to your personal mission or your personal belonging. And then while you're doing that, you want to connect your one main talent and link that to your identity. And so that's what you'll be doing in between. And in your last paragraph, you're going to be explaining how you resolved and how you essentially came to terms with the initial tension of the personal anecdote. And so I think just to give an example, some people talk about, as problems, racism. Some people talk about, sort of shame or grappling with their identity in a certain community. And so those are the types of problems that you want to set up in your initial story. And then you want to solve that after some reflection in the middle paragraphs by the end of your essay. So in the end, you want to just talk about how you resolve the initial problem in your anecdote, what your anecdote says about you, and what you've now realized about yourself. And so, like I said, this is by far the most important part of your essay or of your application. And I hope that's clear. Okay. And okay, moving on. So after the personal essay, another very important thing would just be your school-specific essays. And so I can't emphasize enough research for tackling these sorts of essays. And so Google is your friend, forums are your friend, the school website is your friend. And so you really want to try your very best to find very unique things about the school and then make it clear how you're going to use those school-specific resources. And so, if the school has a great honors program, is there a great books program? Are there certain, fellowships or resources at their library? These are all good things to keep in mind or mention for the school-specific essay. And really, the idea is you want to demonstrate how your personality matches the personality of the school. And so just to give an example, Yale is very big on community service and giving back to your community. That's why we have a very good law school. And I tried to emphasize that in my essays. I wanted to talk about how being Abisha and giving back to my community was my personal mission for my life. And so Likewise, Wharton is a business school, so it's big on finding future business leaders. And so you want to tailor your essays to, a passion for business. And I'd also encourage you to use the paragraph structure that we mentioned. So initial story, explaining your identity, and then resolving the problem of the initial story in the end. That's a very powerful essay structure. And I'd encourage you to use that structure in any of your essays. Okay, and also want to talk about extracurriculars, just because I tend to get asked about that a lot. And so there is no right answer as to which extracurriculars you should be pursuing. No extracurricular is best. The one thing I would stress is there is absolutely no need to fill out all 10 spots on the Common App. And so really want to emphasize quality over quantity. So you want to pick 4 to 7 things that you really enjoy and actually commit yourself to. And those are the things that you want to put down on your application. And so in the Common App, you'll have the ability to go into detail, sort of explain what your involvement with these clubs or activities were. And so you really want to answer the following questions. Did you take any initiatives? Were there any problems or situations that you overcame? And then what were the results of your leadership or involvement? And another point to keep in mind would be these activities should span all 4 years of high school. And so when you start an activity like in your junior year, just for college, this is very obvious, and it will look bad on your application. And with that, I would encourage all of you not to check, I intend to continue this activity in college, that little box under each club for all of your activities. And the reason why is it's very obvious that you're clicking, yes, I intend to do this in college, just to please the admissions officers. And this is very cheesy. So I would discourage you guys from doing something like that. And like we said, we talked about in our personal essay, sort of bringing out our natural talent, or bringing out our spike. And so I want you guys to keep this in mind as you write down your extracurriculars. And so just to bring some color to this, in high school, I was very, very big on the humanities and philosophy and the arts. And so I led a reading group. I led essentially a philosophy club, and those were my main 2 clubs. And then on the side, I did soccer and track. And so really, a lot of extracurriculars are not necessary to get into a good school. I would emphasize doing quality work over just listing all the things that you're, just a little bit involved in. So just to give some ideas, sports, student clubs, cultural clubs, honors groups, volunteering groups, these are all good ideas. Just make sure that you're doing 1 or 2 things that are very connected to your main talent. And then for the rest of your extracurriculars, do other things that are sort of not as important to you, but you still like. So that's what I'd say about the Common App. As far as summer programs, there are a lot of very high quality free summer programs that I'd encourage some of you to look into. So MITES is a MIT sponsored, essentially science summer program. And so they take very smart, diverse kids across the country and sort of train them in an 8 to 12 week program. That's very impressive to put on your Common App. Another one for my more humanities inclined people would be TASP. TASP is essentially a humanities program. It takes professors from some of the top universities, and you get to take college level coursework with very bright, diverse students. And I also believe the state of Virginia's Department of Education has summer programs that, like MITES and TASP have to do with coursework. Those would also be impressive to put on your Common App. And I hope that's clear. Okay, and now testing, there is no formula to high scores. Testing is totally a result of practice, and test taking likewise is a skill. And so just to give you guys some encouragement, I personally went from a 21 on my ACT to 35, which is close to perfect, after weekly practice for 5 months. And so test taking is a skill. And so for my juniors, I'd really encourage you to start really now to take a test, really just get into the groove of taking tests. I would take one every week and score yourself. I'd also invest in an official SAT or a ACT prep book. They have very good explanations at the beginning as to, how to manage your time, how to manage the stress of taking these tests, and also what sort of strategies you should have going in to taking your test. Yeah, so just practice and invest in a prep book is what I'd say and what helped me the most. Okay, and miscellaneous items. So I guess another thing to keep in mind would be applying regular and applying early will give you very different results. And so for a college list that's between 10 to 12 schools, you're obviously going to apply regular to most of them. And just one thing to keep in mind would be you should, in general, apply regular if you're a student from a diverse background, like most of us, and if you're not sure if you're the most qualified. So if you're not sure that, for example, you're the most qualified for Harvard's program, then you should apply regular, if that makes sense. However, you should always apply early to your top choice, always. And so I would just stress understanding the difference between applying to place early action. So early action is non-binding. So you put in your application about 2 to 3 months earlier than everyone else, but you have the choice to go to another school if you don't want to go to that program. Early decision is binding. And so for example, Duke has an early decision program. If you apply early decision and they let you in, you have to go. And so obviously the advantage of applying early decision is your chances are much, much better, as well as you get to know your decision earlier. But the disadvantage is if you apply early decision, you have to go. Especially for those who have certain financial situations, it would make the most sense for you to research their financial aid programs before applying early decision anywhere. And so in sum, always apply early to your top choice, understand the difference between early action and early decision, and apply regular to some more difficult programs would be my advice. Okay, and that's all that I had. I hope that was helpful. And now we can open the floor for questions. If you want to put them in the chat box, and Salome can read them out.
I don't see any questions in the chat box, so you can go ahead and put your questions if you have any.
Ask a question?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Is it possible that we could get access to this presentation or the recording of the meeting?
Yeah, I believe Mesfin is gonna he's recording it. I think all of you will have access to it after, but I can ask him to make sure. But I'm happy to send the presentation out if you guys want that. Okay. Yeah, Thomas.
So what was your GPA in high school?
So my GPA was a 4.3.
And what school did you go to and what programs did you take? Like IB program or AP?
Yeah, so I went to Trinity Christian on Braddock Road, so close to Fairfax High School. As far as programs I took, we didn't have the most AP classes, and so if any of you guys, go to school that doesn't offer the most AP or IB programs, I would just say college admissions officers, they have their research and they know what your school offers. But as far as what I did, really took as many AP classes as I could. We didn't have access to any IB programs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Henok, we have one question. It says, does it mean we turn in 2 types of essay? Essays were not clear for me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So basically, on your Common App, you're gonna, put 10 to 12 schools that you like, and then they're gonna open up their application portal there. And so for all of the schools, you're gonna have to write one main personal essay that's about your personal identity. But each school has a different, essay structure. And so on top of your one main essay that you're going to be sending everywhere, some schools have why our school, what sort of resources do you plan to take advantage of? And so for each school, you're going to have to write a little essay explaining your interest in the school, if that makes sense. So you're going to make one essay that you're sending everywhere, and then each school have, smaller essays that you'll have to tackle for them.
Oh, Henok, I have another question from Bhalat.
Yeah.
Is it true that you have to pay for each college essay you write?
It depends. If you're eligible for financial aid, most schools are very happy to waive any application fee. So I would just be ready to send proof that you're eligible, but I wouldn't worry about that. These schools tend to be very helpful, especially during COVID times.
Okay. Another question is, what extra activities do you recommend?
Yeah. Well, like I said, there are no best extracurricular activities. You want to do things that you enjoy and you're passionate about. Just like we said, I would discourage all of you from being utilitarian and doing things just to put them on a college application. A lot of these top schools are going to interview you, and so if you're putting random things on your extracurricular list, when they interview you, you're going to choke, and so that will look very bad for as far as your application goes. So I would just say do things that you're passionate about and you're actually committed to. I would encourage you guys to aim for 4 to 7 things and do them very well. I would not encourage you to do 10 things not very well. But as far as just ideas, sports is always good. Sports trains you to be disciplined and have good time management. Volunteering, Spanish club, National Honors Association. Those sorts of things are pretty typical. But I would just say do things well that you enjoy and aim to have leadership positions in them. But yeah, do what you're passionate about.
Okay, I have one more question from Abigail Johannes. Is it going to look bad if I chose to not put, oh, 1 second, I lost her track. Okay, is it going to put my SAT or ACT scores if it is optional for school?
Yeah.
Did you get the question? Is it going to look bad if I chose not to put in my SAT or ACT scores? if it is
Yeah.
open? Mhm.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, do we know what her grade is? Is she sophomore, junior, freshman?
She didn't mention that.
Okay. Well, assuming she's a junior, okay, amazing. So if you're a junior, I would just say, you know, invest in a practice book and like take one practice test like every Saturday morning and just test yourself. Read through the introduction and really make sure you understand all of the major concepts, and then take one practice test a day. Like I said, I went from 21, which is very, very, very average, to 35, which is close to perfect, over 5 months. And I did that just by taking one practice test a week and grading myself. And so I would say if you're a junior, you still have time. Personally, I didn't stop taking tests until the fall of my senior year. So as a junior, you have a lot of time, and I would use that to your advantage. If they're not as high as you expect, I might leave them off. But if they're good, as you should aim it to be, then I would put them on your application. But I would just say if you're a junior, you have time until next fall. So use your time wisely and get those scores up, and hopefully you can put them on your application. But if they end up not being as high as you thought, then maybe leaving them out would be better. But this is a question that you can also direct to any college admissions officer for your particular school that you're wondering about. But my advice is you have time, so get the scores up until next fall, and hopefully you can put them on your application.
Okay. On this, if you are attending a competitive high school, how should one distinguish themselves from other accomplished students?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, something that a teacher would always say is, for the selective schools, your GPA will get your foot in the door, but your essay will, push you over the line. And so just to give you guys some context, I worked on my personal essay for about, I want to say 6 or 7 months, little by little every day. And so I went through like 7 or 8 drafts of my personal essay. And so by the time that it was time to turn my application in, my essay was glowing. And so I'd encourage you, if you, go to, a very difficult program or high school, really focus on your essays, focus on, sort of working through your personal identity and letting that shine through your essay. That's by far the best way to distinguish yourself from other smart people. And I guess another thing to say would be, for most of the top schools, a lot of the officers say that over 60% of people who apply are academically qualified to come in. And so, what separates you is not, your grades, but your essays. And you want your extracurriculars to, really highlight your main talent. And you want your essay to show that one main talent as well. So focus on your essays.
Okay. If you are not taking a lot of AP class, do you still have a chance of getting into a good college?
Yes. I say that I have friends, who have like a 3.6, 3.7, and they're at Yale with me now. So I say that not to encourage you to slack off, but your essays and other things can make up for deficiencies in your grades. I would still encourage you guys to take as many challenging courses as you can, and as your interest and time allows. But you can still get into good college, especially if you're from a diverse background. And these flying programs are one way to do that. At the same time, don't slack off. I don't mean to sound like a parent, but it's to your benefit.
Okay, another question. Do you think it's worth it to reach out to professors to help with research?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who did research with local universities in your junior or senior year. So that'd be another thing. I think I would hope that you guys took from this sort of highlighting one main theme or one main spike in your application. And so if you, for example, are really interested in, chemistry or biology, and you take a summer program or class or, internship with a professor, that'd be a great way to, demonstrate your interest in one main thing. So yeah, that'd be a great idea.
Okay. How many AP classes should a junior take out of the 7 classes?
I can't say. I can't answer that question. Everyone's schedules are different. Some people play sports. Some people, have family commitments. It really depends on, what your school offers and what you're interested in. I would just say take as many challenging courses as you can and as you're interested in. But that should be a question you should ask your college admissions counselor or your guidance counselor at school. But I would say take as many as you can without burning out or being too stressed because your mental health is important.
Okay. How long did it take you to take care of essays, applications, and picking your interest etc.?
So I didn't start thinking about college until like winter, so around now of my junior year. So I would say that'd probably be a good time to start thinking about things. I started doing test prep around spring of my junior year. I finished with testing my fall of my senior year. And my essays, I took like starting the summer before my senior year all the way up to November. So basically late into my junior year, I started all of this. So that'd be a good timeline for most of you.
Okay. Is it best to sign up for early or late admission?
Yeah, so like I said, always apply early to your top choice. So my top choice was Yale, and I applied early and I got in. Your chances applying early are much better than applying regular. The confidence, I had a lot of confidence going in applying early because I thought I had a shot in terms of my, just hard stats. And so if you're a qualified candidate, if you're diverse, and if it's your top choice, then I would say apply early. But if, you're diverse, but you're not necessarily sure that you should apply, that you're, the most qualified, then your chances are best regular. So basically always apply early to your top choice and make sure you're qualified enough, or at least that you're average for that school.
Okay. I know I didn't time this, but we have a lot of question coming up. So time-wise, how many minutes do you have? So I can the best questions.
I mean, we can go till 8 and then we can call it a day.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Then what do you advise for students who are in high school in another country trying to get scholarship in US, if you have any experience?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question. I have a lot of international friends at school. Honestly, I would say like go on LinkedIn and see if there are any international students at schools that you're targeting and ask them how they got it. I reached out to a lot of people at like UVA and Yale, and I had them look at my applications and my essays. So I don't know. I can't give advice to that as I was born here. But if that's your situation, then I would think about emailing or sending LinkedIn notes to people at the schools that you're looking at, and maybe asking them for college advice. Most of them are very, very open about this. That's what I would do if I was in that situation. But yeah.
Okay. Should I take the SAT or SAT, ACT, or both?
I would say take both and see what you're best at. And, the difference between the SAT and the ACT is the SAT has a two-parted math section. So one is a calculator. One is allows for a calculator. The other section does not. The ACT math section is all no calculator. And then the other difference is that the ACT has a science section. So you have to read like graphs and like, make theses or guess theses and that sort of thing. So depending on what your interests and talents are, I would say take both, see what you like, see what you don't like, and pick what you're best at. But taking a practice test will not take that much of your time on a Saturday afternoon.
Okay. Dawit was asking, do colleges not have a bare minimum GPA?
Most don't. Yeah, I haven't heard of one that does. But like I said, it would be to your advantage to, make sure you're trying your best in classes. But I haven't heard of one that has a bare minimum. But that's up to you to, do your research on your college list. I could be wrong on that.
Okay. How early should I do admission as a junior? Should I do it right after taking the SAT in March?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a junior, now's the time to start thinking about this, reach out to your guidance counselor. Now is really the time to start working on your essays and getting your stuff together and reaching out to teachers for letters of recommendation. So now's the time to start, is what I would say.
Okay, I think it's gonna help everyone, because how did you figure out you were interested in economics? And it's hard to decide what to major on, right? So how did you figure out you were interested in economics is one of the questions that has been asked.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think really the best way to figure out what you like is really talking to people. And I know that might not be obvious, but when you have certain inspiring teachers. So I had a very inspiring economics teacher in high school, and as I went back home to my family in Ormo region, really realized how how much commerce is necessary to driving a nation's growth. And so post-graduation, I wanted to be part of Ethiopia's growth. And so that's just been a personal mission of mine. But really just having inspiring teachers, making relationships with them, and then connecting that to your personal identity or mission is how I would say you should pick your major.
If you have one bad quarter in your senior or junior year, but the rest of your quarters good, would you still be okay going to college?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say make sure to explain that in the like miscellaneous essay. There's a little box in the Common App that will let you explain like anything. And so I would take that space to explain like there was a family issue or something like that. Make that clear and advocate for yourself. But those things tend to be okay. So I wouldn't worry too much. I would worry about your essay and your testing.
Okay. As a freshman who struggled their first semester, what is your best advice for them going forward?
Yeah, I would say, I guess I would say, try to stay engaged in class, and the best way you do that is by getting close with your teachers. And so this is going to be a skill that you're going to have to develop, as a working professional. But in my own life, when I have relationships with people, like anywhere at school, at church, it tends to make committing to things very easy, because you have a sense that people like want you to do well. And so I guess the first step to flourishing would just be make connections with your teachers, be close with them, and they will look out for you and grade easier. And you'll also find like that to be very personal and very motivating. And I guess the other thing would be, to keep your head up. I personally know people from Nova who've gone to Yale. And so if that's, God's path for you, then I wouldn't stress about that. I would just say, keep your head up and never, ever, ever give up, ever.
Okay, one question. With participating in a summer programs at universities, you hope to apply to increase admissions chances?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. That's what I did. So in my junior year, I attended Yale summer session, and then I had my favorite professor from one of my classes write me a letter of recommendation. And so that's a great strategy. If you can do that, I would say go for it.
Why can't you apply to all your choices early except safeties? Talk about early admissions, because I don't think a lot of kids know what early admission really means.
Okay, so applying early, so the regular timeline is you're applying around December or January. That's regular. When you apply early, you're sending in your application by November 1st for most schools. And so you cannot apply to more than one place early. This is just, all colleges have decided that that's essentially cheating the system. And if they find out, then they'll kick you out. This is why you can't apply to more than one place early, because it puts you at an unfair advantage. So applying early basically means you're demonstrating your interest for the school, and they tend to accept more kids early than regular. So your chances, the acceptance rate applying early, so getting all your materials in by November 1st is much, much higher. Regular is you're applying in December or January, and you get back a decision by April, I think April or May. But if you apply early, you get your decision back around mid-December, December 15th. But basically, you can't apply to more than one place early. It's basically illegal, if that makes sense.
Just a follow-up question to that is, are you locked? If you are admitted to that early admission college, can you reject it?
Yeah, so applying early decision is binding. So if you apply to Duke early decision, if they accept you, you have to go. Unless there's a very like extraordinary circumstance, you have to go. And so I would just caution you for you guys to do your research and see if the school can provide you a available or a decent financial aid package before you apply anywhere. Early decision, but early action is the same thing as early decision, but it's not binding. So if they accept you, you can go somewhere else if you want. It just applying early in either situation demonstrates interest, and your chances are better if it's your top choice.
Okay. How do you make teachers that do not inspire you, but you need their support to help you?
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, that's a good question. I think, one of my favorite theologians talks about love a lot. And, he talks about love is not a feeling that makes us do things, but love as being, a sort of commitment. And once we commit ourselves to something, then that feeling will, come naturally. And so I guess my advice for that would just be to sort of, throw yourself into that class, throw yourself into that relationship with your professor or your teacher, even if you don't like it at first. And once you throw yourself into it and sort of commit to it, the inspiration will come later. But that's what I would say. Yeah.
Excuse me? I have a question, bro.
Who's that?
All right. I wanted to ask, which one is better, AP or dual enrollment? Like, which one's more beneficial?
AP or
Dual enrollment.
Oh, okay. I would just say pick the one that caters to your interest and your main talent the most. But it really depends. I can't, without like having a deep conversation with you, it'd be hard to, answer that. But I would just say, think about what your main talents are, what your schedule is like, and then, plan accordingly. But I would just say challenge yourself as much as you can along with that.
All right, thank you.
I have a question as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do colleges prefer IB classes or AP classes?
It depends. I would just say, the girl that I tutored to get into Dartmouth, she had an IB certificate, and that probably looked good. That'd probably be a great way to challenge yourself. It just, like I said to the last question, just do the program that caters to your interest the most, and that would allow you to really take your time on your essays. That's a personal choice without knowing you personally. But that's what I would say. Challenge yourself and pick the one that caters to your passion.
Okay. Can we use the same personal essay for all colleges?
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. So you're going to send in one main personal essay to all colleges, and then each college has its own school-specific essay. But yeah, that's the
same with the letter of recommendations?
Yeah, the same thing with letters of recommendation.
Okay. I want to study medicine in USA. What should I do?
Can you repeat that? She said, I want to study in the USA. What should I do?
Oh, 1 second. I want to study medicine in USA. What should I do? Medicine.
I haven't tutored anyone like internationally, but like I said to someone, look on LinkedIn. Obviously create your college list first, but see if you can find any international students and reach out to them and ask them for help. And a lot of them tend to be very open to this sort of thing. But it's just hard for me to give advice for that because I was born here. But I would just say reach out to people and see if they can help you. But otherwise, the rest of the presentation would help. Really just focusing on your essays and your testing. That will help the most.
Okay. How many pages should your application be?
Yeah. Well, the Common App has there's a text limit to each thing. So the personal essay is, I think, has a 750 word limit. And so as you type it, you will see there's a certain page limit. But I would say for the essays, try to fill them in most of the way. Doesn't have to be exactly maxed out, but I would say use your space.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So do you recommend submitting both SAT and ACT scores or just the better one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would just pick the better one, and you can easily Google how to compare the scores to each other. But yeah, submit the better one.
Okay. How do I get into contact with students in my dream college?
Yeah, LinkedIn. If you don't know what LinkedIn is, it's like a job social media board. But you can go on LinkedIn, you can create an account, create a profile. You'll have to put in a picture and your accomplishments. But the way you get into contact with people at your dream school is LinkedIn, and send them an email. And just Google the school email format. Most schools are first name dot last name at the school name.edu. But you can Google that. But LinkedIn is the best way to do that. And just search up, Cornell University student, and you can get a bunch.
Okay. Do advanced diplomas help you applying to college?
Yeah, I mean, any way that you can distinguish yourself academically will be a good thing. But for the selective schools, it's your essay that will push you over the line. But as long as you're not stressed out or your mental health is not suffering, I would say challenge yourself as much as possible, as much as your schedule allows. But yeah, go for it.
I don't know if I asked you this question. Which one is better, AP classes or college credit?
I think we touched on.
We did, okay, sorry.
Yeah, someone, yeah.
Okay. What would you say is the most important thing to have when you applying to college? GPA, test scores, essay, extracurricular activities, volunteer hours? The next.
Yeah, I would say the essay by far. There are a lot of smart kids in this, in this country, and so the essay will make you unique. Not to say that you can slack off on the other things, but by far, if nothing else, focus on your essay.
Okay. I am freshman and I would like to start early. Where can I get SAT and ACT practice tests?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you're a freshman, I wouldn't worry too much about the stuff we talked about. I would just, sort of have a roadmap. But if you really want to do that, you can go to the Barnes and Noble and go to the testing section. They have these very, very thick practice test books that are official, And if it has the official logo, then I would say go ahead, invest in that. And you can take like 2 or 3 practice sets, by yourself. Take some time on a Saturday afternoon instead of being on your phone, and do that. And I think the results will come eventually.
How do you write a good essay?
Well, I hope that the essay structure we talked about, with the personal anecdote, explaining, a personal identity problem, and then the rest of the essay, explaining that problem, and then in the end, talking about how you solve that problem in your personal story, or in that personal anecdote. So that's the structure you should follow. But I think Mesfin is gonna be recording this, so you can go back and look at the slides. But that's what we should do. Start off with the anecdote, explain a personal identity problem, and then conclude by solving that problem in that story, and show what lessons you learned from it.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left, but I think I got all the questions. If I skip any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask.
I think I would like the COVID question to be addressed.
Yeah.
They said COVID made it difficult to do volunteer activity these days. Any recommendations how to do volunteer activity before it is too late?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would just look into maybe like, tutoring virtually, or anything that you can do virtually. Maybe obviously if you're in high school, then tutoring like a student over Zoom, like an elementary or middle school student. That's also what I did during high school. I think that'd be a good way to sort of overcome the COVID problem. But other than that, if you're really running out of time, I would just say focus on the things you have been doing, and do them well. I wouldn't, worry too much on doing stuff just for college. I would say do things you're passionate about and do them very well, and have leadership positions in them. But yeah, do a few things and do them well. So I would not worry about quantity.
I think that's all the questions we have for today. It went really well. The turnout was very good. So I think we're gonna have another one, right? We're gonna have another one maybe in a month. So we will send that information out because I can see each one of the bullet points can be their own sessions. So I know kids would hopefully take time and jot down more questions for you to address next time.
Yes.
I think it's time to wrap up. Thanks everyone.
I guess the only other thing that I'd mention is I have been tutoring students on the side. So if you're a junior and you want personalized attention or essay help, I'm happy to do that. We just have to have a conversation about compensation because I'm very busy. But if you want one-on-one help, I'm more than happy to give back to my community. But Mesfin has my information, so feel free to reach out to him if that's something you're interested in.
Thank you for watching our presentation. Please stay tuned for more sessions in the future. If you would like to be included in the Habesha Kids Education Network WhatsApp group, please send your contact information to hkeducationnetwork@gmail.com or text us at 703-608-5053. Thank you. Be informed and be prepared. Goodbye.